Hey, everybody. In last week's episode, we talked about the most dangerous phrase in your business vocabulary. So if you didn't listen to that one, go back and check out the episode prior to this one to find out what that is. All right. So to continue our conversation around how do you start thinking about becoming a scalable expert, we are going to talk about how to go from practitioner to business architect and what the pathway is to be able to do that. So when you're a practitioner, you are helping your clients and customers with the services that you offer, right? Whatever your expertise is. You help them, maybe you help them fulfill in a project, maybe you help them build something, maybe you consult with them on some sort of strategy that they need, whatever it is that you are doing. You're acting as a practitioner, right? You are saying, I am an expert and I am going to help you fulfill on whatever this service is that you have. And that's amazing and that's great. And you could stay there, right? Like you could build your entire business where you are doing one-on-one or consulting work and as a practitioner. The challenge becomes, and as you know from if you've listened to this podcast before, the challenge comes is at some point you get maxed out. Your calendar is maxed out, your energy is maxed out, your client roster is maxed out, right? Especially as you become more successful, right? Like your success sort of becomes a trap because the more success you have, the more clients you have, the more time it takes up. So that's our challenge, right? Like that's continuously the thing that we trip up against. And if you haven't tripped up against it, you will as you get more experience, as you get more clients, and try and navigate through what does it look like when you're at capacity? What does it look like when you're maxed out? And again, you may want to just stay maxed out. You may get to a ceiling and you're like, I'm good. I don't need to do anything else. Great. This episode then is not for you. But for those of you who are maxed out or kind of getting to that point and you're like, what's next? What do I do once I get to that point? Or you may be thinking, I don't want to continue having every single minute of every single day be filled with activities and business consulting gigs that I don't have any time for anything else, right? Most of us started our business so that we would have freedom of choice, freedom of time, freedom of other things. And so that's the conundrum that we end up in, right? So that's being a practitioner. So how do we start to shift into being able to become a scalable expert? And what we need to do is start building our business by design. We need to become the architect of our business. We need to look at like, how do we build something that will be able to sustain our growth without it taking up all of our time? And as you shift from, showing up and doing the thing to looking at how you can build something that still works even when you're not the one who is showing up and in the engagement. So as we start looking at how do we build our business by design, we look at it a little bit differently. The very first thing to do is to package your IP, package your methodology. So what that means is just like, what is your expertise? And when you lead with your expertise, what is it that you want to be known for? What is it that you're an authority in? How do you help your customers today? Because most often, as an expert, you have a way, you have an approach of how you do something, right? How you help your client go from point A to point B, the problem they have to the result that they desire, right? You don't just show up and say, well, hey, customer, I can help you by just doing this thing, right? There's some sort of tangible result that they're looking for. In some cases, it's just your hours, but hopefully you're at the place in your business where you're starting to build something beyond just your time. And so you have an approach that you're using one way or the other. Sometimes people borrow an approach until they feel comfortable or they discover their own unique way of doing things. But at some point in your business growth, you're going to have sort of some some method to the madness, right? You're going to have an approach that you use with your customers. The goal is to start to package that and make it tangible and put it into some sort of system that allows you to deliver it without it being always taking up your time and attention. So you think about that, you're like, okay, great. So how do I start packaging my expertise? I've talked about that a lot on this podcast, and it's one of the core tenets of how we operate, right? With the infinite scale method is you first have to package what your expertise is. So you take kind of the what's the bridge? What's the thing, the pathway that you're helping somebody go when they go from a problem to a result or a solution, which is why we talk about how do you dial in who it is you're helping, what problem you're trying to solve, and what the result is that you're looking for. Because that's the very first thing is if you don't know exactly who it is that you are best or most qualified to help, then that is your very first assignment is to figure that out. But once you package your methodology, then you can give it a name and actually make it into something that is tangible. That is where you start to lead in your industry, in your niche, and become more visible and own that authority. Then you start looking at it and say, okay, great. Now I've got something packaged, and you can use that with the clients that you're doing services with, right? Once you start leading with your expertise, something super powerful happens. Your client stops just asking you to do things, right? They stop leading because they're looking to you to become the expert and give them the path. Once that starts to happen, even in your service-based business, something magical starts to shift and you can start doing things more consistently, which means that you can show up differently. You can consolidate some of the time that you're spending, and it allows you to create maybe some tools and resources to help you streamline the process. And that is a very first level. And then you start looking at it and say, okay, great. So I'm doing that. Now, how can I go from helping and sort of being capped at helping these people and start to grow and scale at a completely different level? And that's where you take your signature methodology, you take your tangible asset that you just created, and you can deliver it in a infinite number of ways. And so you start to deliver it in a way that doesn't require your time and attention. You show up and you help overcome obstacles and hurdles. You don't show up and teach and reteach and have one-on-one conversations and let the client lead you down a different path, right? You start to really look at the scalable systems. How do you engage from a scaling position? Meaning, how do you still create an awesome experience for your customers and clients where they feel totally supported, but in a way that doesn't require your time and attention? That is the powerful shift that will start to happen as you make your expertise more tangible. And then from there, it gives you the opportunity to not only add 10 more customers, but 100 more customers or 1,000 more customers or wherever it is that you want to take your business. Because what you've created is a way for you to show up and deliver a result without it maxing out your calendar. And that's where you go from practitioner to architect. Once you start architecting the scalable engagement, the methodology, the systems, then you've created a whole ecosystem of your expertise that starts to grow exponentially and leverages your time and attention in a way that you could never do before when it was just based on your time. And then the the most dangerous phrase in the business, right, which I talked about last week, is that's when you get out of that trap. You get out of custom, you get out of trying to do all different things for anyone who asks you to do them. And once that starts to shift, the power of leverage starts to take place, right? The power of really growing something that starts to grow beyond you. That's when that starts to happen. But it all starts with packaging your expertise and taking what you are, uniquely qualified to help people with, turn it into your IP in a tangible, packaged approach, and then start to look at how do you deliver that in a way that provides your clients with an amazing experience where they get results and it's not taking up your time and attention in the very same way that it was when it was maxing out your calendar. So hopefully this episode gave you just a little bit of a nugget of how do you go from practitioner to architect. And the last thing I'll say about this, just because for most people who are in a practitioner role, it's not a like you shut this down and start this and then, like it starts to grow to 1,000 people in a week. It doesn't work that way, right? Part of it doesn't work that way because as an expert and a practitioner, somebody who's been doing services and helping customers one-on-one, you sort of need to go through that mental shift of what does it look like to help people when I'm not with them all the time, right? What does that start to look like? And you go through that process. When we have somebody new in the mentorship program come in and go through the infinite scale method, what starts to happen is not only that belief shift, but the systems that we've set up to help people go from practitioner to architect keep them in a position of moving forward and transitioning from having everything be with your calendar to really being able to create something that lives beyond your time and attention. It is a transition, right? It is something that takes time as you're rebuilding your expertise in a completely different way. The exciting part is that it's not, like I said, you're not like ending one and starting another. It's more of an evolution than that, which helps experts and expert business owners, I see you, it helps make the transition a little bit easier. And quite honestly, helps you make sure that you're supporting your customers because all of you have businesses already and you're not going to just like shut it down and start something new. Some of you maybe. I did back when I went through this process. But my hope for you is that you're not at that point yet and we can get you transitioned to really start to look at leverage in your business in a completely different way. So if you're in that spot, reach out. Somewhere in the show notes is a way to get in touch with me. I would love to have a conversation with you about this if this sounds interesting to you, of how do you go from practitioner to architect without having to just start completely from scratch, because that is not the case. I promise you, what happens is when you uncover your methodology and really look at your signature framework, the way that you do things, what starts to happen when you can name it and really claim it is that not only are you more clear yourself, but your customers become more clear, the current ones that you have that you're providing services for. And then all of a sudden, it starts to take shape and have a life of its own, which becomes really exciting. So I'm excited for that journey for you if you're on it. If you are interested or have questions about it, again, reach out to me. In the meantime, if you love this episode, give it a rating, share it with your friends and colleagues, and we'll talk soon.